What if you lived in a world where you never even had to search for anything? You could just type in a question and you could get the answer.
Billable hours definitely a pain point. What's your take on that?
Its premise is no longer valid. Like if you go to a restaurant and you order a bottle of wine, the price for that bottle of wine is so much more expensive than it could be if you just bought it at the store. And I think law firms have for years had a markup of how much they can charge because they have this beautiful skill set to provide guidance to you. And this is the time where we have to be thinking about why am I paying what I'm paying when I think the service should start to become a little bit more accessible.
Do you think lawyers in the US are paying too much for their money?
Yes and no. Early on, when our children were very young, I remember calling my wife, who's also an attorney, and you're saying, I'm going to be at the office late. I'll probably get home around 6:30 or 7. She sat down with me and she said, the people you work for are at home. You have to manage your career to think about your return on that investment. But yeah, to this day, she still wins every argument.
All wives win the arguments, even if they're not.
That's right. That's right.
Tell us about the toughest challenge you faced in your career. How did it shape you as a lawyer?
$110 billion company separating into two, and they needed somebody from the legal team to lead all of the issues that we would have to unpack and have to solve. When I raised my hand, I knew very little about what lies ahead.
And the big question here is, Rishi, how do you get the courage to raise your hand when you're uncertain?
First and foremost, I think you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Rishi Varma, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Amit.
Rishi, I have seen how beautifully you grew in your career from working in law firms and then working in HP for almost 13, 14 years, now heading the legal at Cargill.
Yeah.
Tell me what's the ingredients of a good lawyer becoming a great general counsel?
Yeah, it's a great question. I will tell you that I don't think I have the blueprint all buttoned up, but the things that I have learned that have been helpful for me, first and foremost, I think you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. So much of your education as a lawyer and then your early career as a lawyer is sort of trying to perfect how you answer questions and perfect the outcomes that the advice you're giving. But so much of being a general counsel is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable because no one comes into your office and tells you what a great job you're doing. I just wanted to stop by and say hi. They come in with things that they can't answer themselves. And oftentimes your own team will come with, things that they can't answer themselves. And so you have to get comfortable. And the way you get comfortable is starting to unpack every complex problem. Everything starts with a beginning, and that beginning can be just let me understand the facts. Let me start thinking about where the gaps are between the facts and a solution. And the more you sort of drive that internally, and then start thinking about who are the people that I need, what are the resources or subject matters that would help me answer this question, and then what's my best advice. And it sounds like it's easy to do, just sort of unpack something, but one of my favorite examples is during the global pandemic and COVID. A lot of general counsels were being asked to find solutions for their companies. When should we come back to the office? What should it look like when we do come back to the office? How should we be acting if somebody gets sick? And those are not questions that any of us went to law school for. And yet we realized that there were questions about risk, questions about exposure, questions about comfort, and things that we had to unpack and then start partnering with our colleagues in human resources, our colleagues in compliance and elsewhere. And so it's just a matter of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Hmm. Hmm. This is great. And a lot of these things were never taught to us in the law school, as you clearly mentioned. So do you think law school are getting obsolete?
I don't think they're going to be obsolete. And I think one of the things that we'll likely touch on today is sort of the evolution of the legal profession. And I think just as the legal profession evolves, we have to make sure that our law schools evolve. And so I don't think that they are becoming obsolete, but I think they will change. I think learning how to use generative AI solutions and large language models will likely be a function of what you learned in law school.
Mhm.
thinking through those types of problems and sort of learning how to solve those problems will be something. And I do think that law schools can be better equipped at providing scenario-based learning versus just precedent and case law. Maybe they ought to be thinking more about practical solutions, practical implications, and um, almost doing case scenarios in class where you understand this is a problem we have, whether it's a crisis, a corruption issue, something like that. How would we handle this and what would be the steps to undertake there? So some of that might actually come into play, but also I think there's going to be an evolution of what we think of as a well-trained early career law student or an early career lawyer.
Hmm. And I saw your journey, Rishi, and you are worked in law firm, you worked in house. If you had to advise, let's say, a younger lawyer, how to choose a career path, let's say between becoming a partner in a law firm versus become an in-house general counsel, how can somebody choose their path and can get clarity about it when they're starting their career?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that there's no right answer and there's no wrong answer, but there's also no linear path. A lot of the things that I've experienced in my career, if you told me, okay, I'm going to go through year by year at a law firm, become partner, then do this, then do that, that's oftentimes opportunities present themselves in nonlinear fashion, and you have to think about is that something I need to do? Is that something I want to do? For me in my own career, one of the biggest opportunities I had was to help guide the legal part of the HPE HPI separation. So, $110 billion company separating into two, and they needed somebody from the legal team to lead all of the issues that we would have to unpack and have to solve. And I will tell you, when I raised my hand, I knew very little about what lies ahead. I was an M&A lawyer, I was a securities lawyer, but I had never thought of how do you unscramble an egg that's been around for 75 plus years, and how do you do so methodically and with all the discipline involved. But um, so for me, it's less about, should you go in-house or should you go to a law firm, but it's where are you in your ability to take a nonlinear path when the opportunity presents itself?
And the big question here is, Rishi, how do you get the courage to raise your hand when you're uncertain?
I mean, that's part of being uncomfortable. I think the courage of confidence, the courage of I won't know all of the answers, but I know that I have strong abilities to work with each other with other people. I know I can start to think about issue, spotting, and then just finding out, okay, if this is an issue, let's understand the issue, then let's look to solve it. It's a skill set to sort of process, manage something, and something I've learned over my career, people who can do that in large, complex organizations will very quickly have accelerated career progression because there's not a lot of people that are A, willing to do it, and B, can do it. And so, how do you raise your hand? I think you raise your hand out of ambition. Is this something that will lead to more learning on my part, growth in my career, and growth in the experiences that I have as a legal profession? And I think that that's why you raise your hand.
And raising your hand is as important as not raising your hand. Sometimes you have to very carefully not raise your hand, because if you're raising hand for everything, you're going to be,
Sure,
yeah. So,
you will sort of exhaust your own ability to do things well.
yes, absolutely. So somebody told me that, I mean, in order to do great things, do fewer things.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's the, and so I'm sure would have raised your hand at certain places, and those were mistakes as well. So if let's say our audience today, younger lawyers, want to learn from what career mistakes did you make, uh, will you be able to tell us some of the
Yeah.
stories and how can we learn from that?
Oh, for sure. The number of mistakes I've made, are a lot, but I think that hopefully gives people confidence that it's okay to make mistakes as long as you understand and you learn and you improve from those. But I'll give you a couple of examples. One, very early career, I'm a junior associate, first year associate, right out of law school, and a partner asks me to handle something, and tells me to go talk to, 2 or 3 of the paralegals that are in the corporate bullpen, and they can help understand what needs to happen. And in my own mind, I thought, "Okay, this is a hierarchical place. There's a partner. The partner's just told me I need to go tell the paralegals what to do." And the 2 huge mistakes I made there were, number 1, I didn't understand what was being asked of me, and all I thought of was somebody else can do this. And number 2, I only thought of somebody else can do this for me rather than me learning what to do. And so as the issue presented itself and got more and more complex, I learned, unfortunately, the hard way, that as I was trying to tell the partner what was happening, I didn't really know what was happening. And so it was a multiple multitude of failures on my part in terms of A, how you treat people, B, how you handle the assignments, and C, kind of what accountability you take in those instances. So I learned that, the hard way, but I learned it. And then I'll say, fast forward to later on in my career as a manager, and you're starting to oversee larger groups of people, and that's both something we all think we crave, but then when you're in the moment, it's a lot harder to actually execute and handle. And I think one of my failings was always wanting to make sure that I felt like everybody agreed with me as we were trying to do something. And if there were 2 people, 1 person that didn't agree with me, I went out of my way to try and figure out, well, what is it that you would like to do? And I almost felt like I was negotiating my own action items, my own initiatives, my own goals with the people that reported to me because I wanted them to be happy. I wanted them to feel like this was theirs too. And I learned that really what you need to do is you need to be, inspiring about the goals that you're setting, and you need to communicate effectively to your team about why those goals matter for them, but you need to be consistent and disciplined in your ability to execute on those because there will be challenges, there will be frustrations, and there will be uncertainties. But if you let all of those things get in your way, you will stop seeing the goal at the end of the process, and you'll only see the ways in which you need to negotiate sort of the micro outcomes before you get to the final outcome, and it won't end up being what you wanted it to be. So, sort of the 2 bookends of, early career and sort of middle to late career learnings of things that I could have done differently.
Brilliant, beautiful advice, Rishi. Rishi, over this, the early career mistakes we have made in our career, then moving on, we're making different mistakes. And while we are progressing in our career, one important lesson I learned from one of my mentors, he said, Amit, make sure you do not pay too much for your money.
Mm.
Basically, a lot of lawyers especially work too hard and they miss the important event of their kid, important function of their spouse, a birthday party. Do you think lawyers in the US are paying too much for their money?
That's a great question. I like the way you phrased it. I think yes and no. I think there are all too often times where we feel so compelled to just work, work, work that we will easily sacrifice the things in our lives that are not subject to a paycheck. And we think it's easier to tell our significant other, our children, our parents, no, I'm busy, I have to work. And so there is that instance. But in my own career, I mean, one of the things that and I all credit to my wife, who's also an attorney. Early on when we had our children were very young, I remember calling her saying, "Oh, I'm gonna be at the office late. I'll probably get home around 6:30 or 7." And she's like, "Well, the kids are gonna be eating at 6." And I said, "Yeah, I'll have to miss that." And, well, they're gonna do bath time out. "Oh, I'll miss that." And, after about a week of doing this, she sat down with me and she said, "The people you work for are at home. And so you need to find ways that allow you to have a career, but also have the career for the people you work for." And it was that instance where I said, "Okay, I'm gonna do things differently." And I sort of dinner family time, dinner time, bedtime, bath time sort of became non-negotiable. And I would, whether I left the office and took about an hour, hour and a half to myself, as technology evolved and, we could do things with laptops and Wi-Fi and those kinds of things, I would just log in at home. But it allowed me to have a specific disciplined amount of time that I always thought of as that's where I work for the people that are at home. And it's paid off in dividends. My children are all grown now, but dinner time is something that we very much value when we all get together. And that's where the conversations are. The how was your day? What are the things that you're worried about, excited about? Those kinds of things. So I'm happy I didn't miss those. But all too often we think of our return on investment as what will my paycheck look like if I keep working, and we don't take enough time to think about the return on investment in your own life.
This is beautiful, beautiful. And I love the way you phrased it about the career and the people. If you can repeat that one more time for our audience.
Yeah, just that, the people you work for are at home, and you have to manage your career to think about your return on that investment. You have a family, or you have a significant other, you have an entire group of people in your life that have devoted time to getting you where you are today. And similarly, you have to think of your return on that investment. What am I doing to maximize their sacrifice, or maximizing the return on that investment?
Beautiful, beautiful. And you also mentioned your wife is also a lawyer. So how does it to have two lawyers in the same house?
Yeah. Well, so she stopped practicing, I think when our youngest was about 3 or 4, so it's been about 16, 17 years. She still wins every argument, that there's never a question about that. But, there was a similarity of the things we've just been talking about. When we were early on in our careers, we both understood the time sacrifices we needed to make, but also the challenges that we had as the stresses and strains of our jobs, and things that are sometimes out of your control, whether it's a client that is being particularly difficult, or you're in a negotiation and the other side is being particularly challenging. Sometimes it helps. It certainly helped me when she and I could kind of commonality of issues, a commonality of stresses we could exchange with one another. But yeah, I mean, to this day, she still wins every argument.
I'm sure. I'm sure all wives win the arguments, even they're not.
That's right. That's right.
Brilliant. Uh, Tell us about the toughest challenge you face in your career. How did it shape you as a lawyer?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I really go back to this transformation, this separation that we did, HPE and HPI. Um, One of the keep in mind, it took about 15, 16 months. And so it's every day was you wake up and you are looking at a whole host of issues, some of which you understand, some of which you don't even know what this means. And you spend your day talking to different working groups, talking to different experts, understanding what lies ahead. And as the epicenter of the legal separation, you were also being, people would share with me all of the things that could go wrong, all of the concerns they had. How are we going to meet this deadline? What's going to happen with this filing, that filing, et cetera? And so you weigh this, like you carry this with you every day. And it's, I'm a, I'm a, I'm somebody who writes out my to-do list every day. And at the end of the day, when I can't cross everything out, I feel like, okay, what did I not do today that I should have done differently? And in that 15-month time frame, there was never a day that I could ever say that I was done with whatever I was on my plate, and it was just incredibly challenging. It was a high degree of stress, high degree of visibility. On a moment's notice, you're called into the CEO's office to answer questions about what's happening here, why is this stalled, or where are we on this? Certainly presenting to your board on a regular basis. And then also, talking to your peers and talking to your colleagues internally, town halls and coffee chats and those kinds of things, just to keep people understanding where we are, why we're headed this way, and what lies ahead, against a backdrop of great deal of personal, for everybody, uncertainty about where they will be. Will they be with either company, or will they be let go? And what does that look like? And so, a range of human emotions, a range of professional challenges, all wrapped up into one, and for a long period of time. I'd say that was by far the greatest challenge I had in my career. But as I mentioned earlier, the greatest opportunities came from those challenges, because I was able to learn so much more about myself, my skill sets, my abilities, the things that I could process, and then certainly the learnings I had as a result of that. Ironically, you start becoming an expert in these things after you go through them, not because of anything other than the fact that now somebody else is sitting in your shoes at another company and they've heard of the separation that just took place. So they want to hear what you did and what you learned. So it sort of kept paying itself forward along the way. But yeah, definitely one of the toughest challenges I had.
And do you believe in this case, like pressure is a privilege?
Yes, I do. But particularly pressure has to have that sense of deadline. And I will never forget internally, when we were thinking about this separation, we all looked at, our IT work streams, our finance work streams, our legal work streams, HR, everything. And we presented to our CEO, this is going to take about 18 to 19 months at best. Like if we do everything right, 18 to 19 months. And she looked around the table. She understood everything. She's a smart, smart woman. And she said, okay, we're going to get it done in 15 months. And, you know, you had no choice, and so pressure was automatically, and we started every meeting with a clock of how many days are left, how many, whatever, down to the hours, and it was that sort of intense pressure that forced you to like, you had to solve these problems. Oftentimes, I think we have pressure, but we don't have an overall deadline with that pressure, and I think those 2 are slightly different. When I think of, the global pandemic and COVID, a high degree of pressure, a high degree of uncertainty, but that's a different kind of pressure. This one was sort of the, can you deliver? Can you meet the deadline in front of you? And there's a muscle that you have to sort of build to make sure that you can solve a whole host of issues leading up to that deadline. And that to me was sort of a privilege of that opportunity.
Beautiful, beautiful, Rashid, beautifully put. Uh, the biggest piece of advice you've ever gotten.
Yeah, so not surprisingly, this is where I would start to think about my parents. My father, I grew up in a family, so my father is pediatrician, my mother OBGYN, very, very immersed in patient care, patient service, and just incredibly dedicated. And my father always used to tell me, particularly early in my career, make service your priority and success will follow. And, he said, focus more on what you can do. You have a privilege of a background and an education that not everybody has. And there are people in this world that need legal advice and legal support and an understanding of what their rights are when they're thinking about certain things. And not everybody has access to that. So make service your priority and success will follow. And I thought a lot about that, and you think to yourself as an early career, all I can do is go to the office every day and, I'm getting there at 8 and leaving at 10 and, this is painful. I'm working 7 days a week and my dad wants me to go do some sort of community service at the same time. But it's amazing the perspective you get when you serve others and when you start to see the privilege of your own position, the privilege of the education you have, the privilege of the skill set you can deliver to somebody else. I mean, there's nothing greater than that sort of jarring perspective to shape what you wanna do with yourself, with your career, and, how you wanna raise your family. So for me, it's stuck with me early days, and it's been a part of my overall ethos as I go forward.
Mm, beautiful, beautiful. As a lawyer, we pay a lot of, let's say, the education, the JD, the law programs are not inexpensive by any means. And in the beginning, people are focusing a lot on making money. How has your relationship with money has changed over time?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly it changes as you grow and as you expand your own thinking. I mean, I care about, making sure that I'm recognized for the worth that I believe I have. But it's a lot about what am I doing with my career? What am I doing in my personal time? How am I spending the time that I have when I'm not focused on my job or focused on the work ahead, and having the ability to do those things. That to me is sort of that can be a different size pie for everybody. but it's more about being valued both in the work you do, but valuing the time you have to do other things.
And how do you think, let's say, you versus your peers, how are you believing things differently? How are you different from your peers?
I mean, right now we're at sort of an inflection point in the legal industry with the rise of generative AI solutions, and what is that doing to change how people work in the legal industry? I wouldn't say that I'm so different, but I do think I'm sort of on the farther end of the spectrum of we need to adopt generative AI solutions faster. And I used to think of it as, well, that's because this will just make our jobs, it'll be cheaper, we'll gain efficiencies. But the reality is, this is a technology and an evolution of technology that's at our fingertips that will reduce so many pain points that we all have in our day-to-day work, whether you've been working for 3 months or 30 years. And I think of, to me, the aspiration would be, what if you lived in a world where you never even had to search for anything? You could just type in a question and you could get the answer. And once you get that answer, you could generate insights and you could develop and deliver advice to your client. So at a company, we live with our own data, and oftentimes some of the most urgent questions that we in the legal department will say, well, what does the contract say? Tariffs, great example of the most recent, 12 to 15 months. These tariffs were just issued. What impact does that have on us today? What does that have on our customer contracts or supplier contracts? Not a tough question once you have the data. And the frustration for many is not, I don't understand how to process this. It's, I wish I had more time because it took me 3 weeks just to get all the contracts, and then I had to review them, and then I had to summarize all of the provisions. Well, imagine now that becomes, instead of 3 weeks, it's about 3 minutes, and you can spend time reviewing those outputs and then providing insights and strategic advice to your internal stakeholders. To me, that is the solution we're striving for, and I think of it as the rise of strategic talent. We're going to want to, I'm hiring people because of their strategic minds, their ability to process information. I'm not hiring somebody because I think they can read a spreadsheet or they can put a spreadsheet together. But oftentimes that's what we end up doing in our lives because we don't have the data at our fingertips. And so if we can do something to eliminate search for data altogether, I think that's going to really be a game changer for us. And so for me, when I think, how am I different than my peers, that may be an area where I'm leaning more forward. There are certainly many that are, but I'm leaning into that very hard as I think about what matters for my own department going forward.
Beautiful. So let's talk about AI a little more in depth, Rishi, since you're talking about
Sure.
AI. How big is the legal team currently in Cargill?
So I oversee legal, ethics and compliance, government relations, and global security, and all told about 500 people.
Oh, wow. That's a big team. Now, this 500 people, how are you improving their efficiency with AI?
Yeah, so we do something every quarter. I ask each of my leaders to, what is your AI dividend? How are you taking existing work and making it easier for your teams? How are you reducing pain points? And so it starts with actually understanding, well, what are your biggest pain points? And then you have to start figuring out, are there solutions that can reduce those pain points? And it doesn't have to be AI necessarily. Sometimes it's, can we just prioritize better? But from an AI perspective, there's a great, taking apart a process and figuring out, are there pieces of this process that would be better suited for an AI generated or AI enabled solution versus a human solution? As long as you keep that human in the loop and you make sure that you've got somebody overseeing something, is there a way to accelerate how we do things? And so we're finding that our teams are looking at ways to do business, ways to, find solutions for the business through some AI enabled solutions much faster. And every quarter we measure as a leadership team, what's our AI dividend? Where have we saved time? Where have we reduced pain points, and where have we generated insights for the business? Certainly, value is the name of the game, but as we start looking at this on a quarterly basis, that's where I want us to be thinking about what are we doing, what solutions are we offering, what tools are we thinking about, but more importantly, where are we working smarter? We the name of the game here is to reduce those pain points.
Beautiful. This is like a north star for a lot of companies who want to become more efficient. This is these beautiful questions. So tell us about when, let's say, you're talking to your lawyers, you're making them more efficient, you're asking them what's your AI dividend. What kind of, are you building some tools yourself, or are you buying tools across from different vendors? And which tools are those, if you can share that with our audience?
Yeah. Yeah, so I will say we're certainly working with, as a company, we are working with different solutions like Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude from Anthropic, and looking at ways in which those can help us generate better answers. Certainly, the Copilot environment self-contained, and so we can ask questions about ourselves and our own data. But the challenge from a legal profession, and many this will resonate with many, is I would love it if all of our data sat in one place, but it doesn't. And even when we have tried to implement contract lifecycle management, it just doesn't sit in one place because people don't, legal professionals mostly don't really work the same way. Sometimes there will be a SharePoint. Sometimes it's on your hard drive. Other times it's shared in the CLM. But when you look at where the data sits, it doesn't all sit in the same place. And so one of the things we are working to build is how do we build a solution that will connect the data that we need it to connect. And so if I type in a question about contracts and what are the tariff impacts for all of the contracts in this industry, in this business, it will go and look for those contracts, but it will go whether those are in SharePoints, whether those are on hard drives, or whether they are in some sort of system. It'll find those contracts and it'll generate the answers. That's a long lead time type of solution because it really relies on your data integrity. But that's something we're working with. I can't, because we're under NDA, I can't share the name, but we are working with a third party to help us figure out what does that look like, and can we get to a place where we've, again, solved for some of those pain points? But that's what we're doing in the legal department across the company. I'm happy to say that many of our businesses and our functions are looking at where can they also find pain points and solution for those. And one of the best things that we've done is we've just invited the teams across the company to just play, play in this sandbox, play in this area of new technology. And, you know, you may have, anecdotally, people will share things like, oh, I created a menu for this week because I'm going to be traveling and I want to do this, or it helped me with my grocery list, or it helped me, plan my next trip. But then the more and more you start seeing those things, then people start connecting dots with, actually, it helped me think about the connection between, the climate regulations in Brazil and the climate regulations in France. And I started to play with what are the symmetries and et cetera. So you may start with kind of what am I just doing in my free time, but then it gradually bleeds into, and how will this help me work?
This is very interesting, and with so much of AI that you want to put in your company right now, especially in the legal team, how does the chief legal ensure AI governance?
Yeah, I mean, that's paramount. We oversee responsible use of AI and the governance around the solutions that are in our overall digital ecosystem as a company. And so my team, my ethics and compliance team, is tasked with understanding and they've worked in partnership with our IT organization to develop a governance regime. So new tools coming in, there's a governance around, are they credible? What's the cybersecurity threat? Can we make sure that none of our information leaks into another large language model? We're not training somebody else on our data, et cetera. And so we have those built-in governance mechanisms. And then we're training and constantly raising awareness internally around the use of AI platforms, both from a standpoint of always checking the work, but also from a standpoint of making sure that you're not using a platform that you haven't first vetted through our IT department and our legal department to make sure that those don't have leakage of our data.
Mm. And this is brilliant, Rishi. And also about, since you are adding a lot of infusing a lot of AI in your company, especially in legal team, do you see your legal team shrinking or expanding?
It's yeah, I mean, it's the fear factor of all of this is, are you eliminating jobs? And I think what I would say is I think we are at a place where we are evolving roles. And what I mean by that is I think there will be certain places where we have efficiency gains as a result of the AI enabled solutions we have, but we are also evolving what work people do. And so, um, if I'm, forever in the world of intellectual property and I've been drafting patents and I've been thinking about those issues for years, and then I suddenly have an AI platform that can help draft those patents for me, I'm not necessarily losing my role. What I'm doing is probably allowing myself to be more strategic, working closely with our R&D team on the ultimate evolution of that patent. Why do we have that patent? What is it that we need to protect? Where is this differentiating us in the markets? How can we help build the portfolio of relevancy that way? So I do think that that's going to be the evolution. Sure, there will be certain places where we probably had very routine areas of work that are probably no longer needing a human person to do those things, but by and large, I think we're thinking more about the evolution of role rather than the elimination of role.
Absolutely. And this is what happened when Green Revolution came or Industrial Revolution came. We thought that
Sure.
it's going to take away all the jobs, but the amount of work always increased. And that also, I also believe that AI will help you create more jobs, far more jobs. People are able to upskill themselves and do strategic roles instead of just doing the routine, mundane jobs. And those will be
Right.
eliminated and those should be eliminated. We human beings are designed to perform
I
bigger,
think
better
so.
tasks and not just do routine, mundane. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I think that we aligned on that. Do you think some of the younger lawyers will have issues finding jobs?
So I think along the same lines, Amit, I think there will be an evolution of what it means to be a junior associate, a junior lawyer. Um, I I personally think that the next generation is going to be so well versed at prompt engineering that there will be this almost otherworldly way in which they process questions because they think of solutions that we haven't even used before. And, I think back to when I was a baby lawyer and, it was the advent of the Westlaw and Nexus, Alexis search databases. The more senior partners at the firm, I remember saying, "Well, I mean, that's ridiculous. You guys have it easy." Like, I used to have to go into a library, look in the case book, read the case book, highlight it's being done for you. We're not even gonna need associates anymore. And sure enough, that didn't happen. We evolved into how we use it and how we use it to generate, better briefs, faster, case management, those kinds of things. And I think we're in that same situation. I think you may think of your pool of applicants and you may start thinking about what's their AI proficiency and how is that something that I want to make sure I have because I need somebody to come in. I need that next generation to come in and build that AI proficiency in my department or in a law firm's department. So, will they have a hard time finding jobs? I mean, it's never easy. But is it because the legal profession is going away at a certain level? No. I think it's because the billable hour might be going away. That might be something we have to rethink. But for sure, I think we're going to see the evolution of what law schools teach, what law firms train, what in-house companies train, and what those early career associates look like.
Hmm. So billable hours definitely a pain of law. I've done almost 60 plus podcasts with journal councils across US, and billable hours definitely a pain point. What are you said that they might be going away. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think of it as, and frankly, it's incumbent upon the clients of those law firms, and by that I mean our in-house, the general counsels, chief legal officers, et cetera, to force the issue. Um, the billable hour was designed on a premise that it takes a certain amount of time for skilled people to process information and generate advice based on that processing. Take a large acquisition where the target company puts 1,000,000 documents into a database. The first conversation with your outside counsel will say, okay, well, it'll take us about 6 weeks to just unpack all of this. And we'll process it, we'll itemize it, and we'll figure out where things are. We'll review them, we'll give you this beautiful memo. And I think those are the kinds of things that should be eliminated. That process should now be a matter of hours, and it should be a very quick solution for the customer, for the client, to then start thinking about, okay, now let's focus on the issues that I need from a deal perspective. So I think law firms are going to be asked, and they should be asked to be more holistic in their billing. And so, we've often, talked about alternative fee arrangements. I don't think they'll be as alternative anymore. I think that, law firms will have to be thinking about what's the overall value that I can bring to this deal, and what can I charge for that versus I'm just gonna bill, and at the end of the day, you're gonna get number of hours and, I'll discount it because I had associates on it and that kind of thing. So, I think that's the model that I think is going to change, and I think it's incumbent upon the clients to change that model.
So what basically are saying you like one fixed fee per particular let's say one fixed fee per.
Yeah, I think so. I think it eliminates the how much time should you be spending on this,
Mm.
and it allows the law firms to generate their own, AI-enabled solutions because they probably don't wanna spend more time than they should spend time on it. But if you have a fixed fee arrangement or, some other type of arrangement, as long as I do think the billable hour is just its premise is no longer valid.
Mm. And do you think law firms are definitely using AI as well, a lot of them, and but are they passing on the efficiency to the clients? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, are they? I don't know for sure, but I think of it as like if you go to a restaurant and you order a bottle of wine, the price for that bottle of wine is so much more expensive than it could be if you just bought it at the store. And I think law firms have for years had a markup of how much they can charge because again, they have this, beautiful skill set that they are relying on to provide a service and to provide guidance to you. And for sure it will matter most on larger big bet items. If there's a, class action billion-dollar lawsuit or an acquisition opportunity for billions of dollars, people will care more about the outcome, and so will be more fearful of changing the construct that exists today because no one wants to be wrong and then be, pointing out that, "I can't believe you tried this new AI tool on a billion-dollar acquisition, and you got it wrong." So there's some learning involved here and some comfort that we have to all be thinking about. But I do think I think law firms are doing the same thing that in-house companies are. They're exploring ways of doing things differently and where can we leverage the tools that will make us better. Again, it's just we rarely talk to each other as client and service provider about why their fee structure is what it is. We talk more about the need for the service, but, I've never asked a partner, "How come you're billing $2,000 versus 1,000?" It's just not in our nature to do that, but this is the time where we have to be thinking about, "Why am I paying what I'm paying for the service when I think the service should start to become a little bit more accessible?"
Brilliant, excellent. I'm with you on that. Uh, how do you see the role of general counsels and chief legal changing with AI?
I mean, we have to change too. I can't sort of look down in my organization and say, you guys make it happen. I too am playing very frequently and regularly with different large language models and seeing where I think some value can be added. Look, my own view, I think the future legal department has both a human and an AI component. I can see the org chart having my strategic talent, my legal professionals, my lawyers, my other legal professionals, But then I also have sort of an infinite number of AI agents, and I think about an AI-driven portion of my org chart that is driving a number of, functions for me and a number of solutions for me, and I think of that all as sort of legal ops on steroids. And so for me, that is the evolution, and, the in-house profession is not that old in this country. It's maybe 40 years old, and over that 40-year time frame, we've gotten very good at thinking of ways to save money, whether that's, offshoring legal services or developing a legal operations group that helps us understand how we manage our law firm engagements. And I think this is just an evolution of that, as we will get very good at using um, AI-enabled resources to solve for the complexities that are coming our way. I mean, our no one's no job, no company, no industry is getting less complex, and so I think that to me is where the future law department, what it looks like, half human, half AI, and that's what you're managing.
Brilliant, brilliant. And Rishi, if you had to, let's say, restart your career in 2026, you were, let's say,
Hmm.
graduate in 2026, how would you do your career in 2026?
You know, I would probably. It's so hard to be revisionist of yourself because the things that I can do now are not things that I think I could have done when I was a early career lawyer. But one of the things that I do now and I've done for the last 15 years that I wish I had done sooner is so every Friday I kind of whatever I'm working on, whatever I need to do, unless it's of course an urgent matter or whatever, there's a certain part in the day where I just stop the work of the day and I stop the work of the week, and I don't use that to go play golf, or I don't use that to do anything else, but I use it to sort of think about what's next. What am I reading something that's of interest that's sort of driving me in this space? Am I looking at different things? Am I listening to a podcast that's, shaping what I do? But am I like, sometimes I just spend an hour playing with different large language models and, like, where did I ask the same prompt and I see which one gave me a better answer. But it's not as sort of intended to say this is, I have 0 hobbies. I'm a pretty boring person. That's not true. Um, but I wish I had given myself more structured time to be creative, not just reactive to whatever's on my list of things to do, reactive to the question at hand, but structured time to think about what lies ahead. And I don't know what I would look like today, but, that would be an interesting thing to have thought of years ago when certain things were just the evolution of the internet, the evolution of the iPhone, the evolution of things that, it's interesting where we would be going, and, I just wish I had been more creative and, again, have structured time to be creative.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. It's a brilliant piece of advice. Rishi, do you have any life hacks?
Well, that's one, is the ability to, force myself to have time, just to myself, and it's a pretty good one, because I've it's not something that's intuitive, but I've told my own team, I need you to have about an hour a week, if not more, where you are playing in the sandbox and you're experimenting with things that aren't on your to-do list, because you are a much better leader. You're a much better solution provider when you do that. So that's certainly one. And the others, I mean, whether they're hacks or just discipline, I mean, dinner remains non-negotiable, even though our kids are out of the house and my wife and I, but it's still that moment of time where you've put everything aside and you are just, again, that return on investment, talking about your family, talking about your days, your travel plans, those kinds of things. And then the third is, absolutely maximizing your time to do things outside of work. Work is exhausting, and sometimes what you want at the end of that process is to do nothing. I wanna just spend the weekend at home doing nothing, but sometimes forcing yourself to travel, forcing yourself to go and do something outside, um, gives you that energy of perspective. And then the fourth one is just absolutely, I have a deeply ingrained sense of service to others, and when not with my family, when not working, My wife and I are typically doing something in the community to both enrich ourselves, but also like what can we do to help the next generation? What can we do to help others? And so whether it's a life hack or just, what we do, but it does constantly come back to helping me be a better person, which helps me be a better person at work.
And all these come from your parents who gave you the mantra of
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Parents certainly fed the service oriented aspect of this. I'd be lying if I said they didn't feed my work ethic. They're 88 and 85, and they're both still very active in the medical community and thinking about new issues. My father and I were speaking yesterday, and he was talking about a lecture he wants to give next week on the use of AI applications in medicine for residents. My mother, absolute passionate women's healthcare issues and talking about ways in which you can deliver more access through telehealth. I mean, these are things that, when you think about when they started their careers to where they are now, it's fascinating that they're still as passionate as they are. So that's certainly been a model for me that, if you can find something that you're that passionate about, then that's, you've won the lottery. And I think they showed my sister and I at an early age in our own thinking that you shouldn't settle for anything that you're not passionate about. And so thankfully, I know my sister's also a doctor, so I am the true black sheep of the family, having only become a lawyer. So, but they definitely shared that, like you've got to be passionate about what you do, and when you are passionate about what you do, you will find that you are better at what you do.
beautiful. That's beautiful. Let's talk about IP a bit. Since we're talking spoken to a
Yeah.
bunch of general counsels and companies of like, as big as Cargill, what are the biggest IP issues a large companies are facing?
Yeah. So it's interesting, I came from a technology world and then I came to the food and ag world, and IP has a different emphasis here. It's very much we work with our customers on a regular basis about where can we provide differentiated solutions. We are, not surprisingly, like arm in arm with our R&D centers all over the world and looking to where we provide those solutions. But oftentimes, what's just as important about our intellectual property strategy is we are privileged to have access to a number of, trade secrets of our customers. And so, how do we manage those and help them with their trade secrets to help them reformulate food offerings, reformulate ingredients, and those kinds of things? So, we kind of play an interesting role in the IP department here, where we very much focus on our own patent development, our own proprietary portfolio. But then we're also very focused on our customer portfolio and where are we providing the differentiation for them or the reformulation for them.
So you're also helping your clients do IP and reformulate for them as well.
Y- y- Yeah, and by that it's sort of, if they have an issue that they need to solve for,
Mhm.
they will come to us and say, "How do you help us solve this issue? Help us find a way to meet within these guidelines, these dietary guidelines, or find a way to change our formula such that it adds more of this ingredient or takes away this ingredient." And so we work jointly with them to find those solutions, and oftentimes they will be a jointly owned solution, or if it was theirs to start with, we certainly assist them so that they can develop their own solution going forward. Or if it's a solution we've provided, we will formulate, reformulate it, and it becomes our differentiated IP.
Brilliant, brilliant. And and in the long term, what remains your IP strategy? Like you want to focus more on trade secrets or patents, or how do you decide what to keep as trade secret, what to decide to keep go for patent?
Yeah, I think it's, again, I came from a world where in the technology space there was a lot of talk about should everything be open sourced versus should we have our own patent portfolio, and what really matters and what drives innovation. In the food and ag space, I think it's more about what is driving innovation with our customers and how are we helping our customers. So I whether it's a patent or a trade secret or a copyright or something, to me, what matters most is what portion of our portfolio is relevant to the solutions that we're providing, and how can we make sure that we have, you know, aspirationally, I want 100% of our portfolio to be to be relevant to any and all of the solutions that we're providing worldwide. That's never the case because uh, patents, come to be, through different processes, and you have older patents that may or may not be as relevant today. But that's something we look at as our portfolio. How relevant is our portfolio to what are the biggest challenges of our customers? What are the biggest challenges in the food space today? And what are the biggest challenges in the agriculture space where we all see the need for sustainable solutions, regenerative agriculture, and those kinds of things? So, how can we formulate opportunities that are differentiated that focus on those areas?
Beautiful. And do you also believe a large company like Cargill should also focus on the patent portfolio, IP portfolio, because of, let's say, the shareholder value, the market value, the perception of people that might have of how much you're innovating? Is that important as well?
So what's important to us is that we are innovating and that our customers come to us because we are innovating. Cargill is a privately held company, so we have the privilege of not having to deal with a public shareholder base. But it's just as important for our Cargill family owners, that we are absolutely innovating with our customers at every point in the process. What can we do to help differentiate? Because that is sort of the staple for this company. So less so the perception, more so the, like, where are we on that innovation path with our customers?
Hmm. Brilliant. Um, Rishi, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Hmm. Invest in NVIDIA, first and foremost.
Or Bitcoin?
Yeah, exactly. Um, I it's funny. I I feel so blessed and privileged to have done the things I've done. I think what I would tell my younger self is, like, it all works out. Like, don't sort of be defined and dogmatic about, I have this path and this path only. I started as an associate in New York, and, found my way to Houston, to Minneapolis, and um, none of that was on my bingo card in law school. But telling yourself that it'll all work out, but also that your path is not linear and it doesn't have to be. I think those are the things that I would tell myself. And again, I'd probably not listen because I'd be so stressed about what's on my plate at the moment.
Yes, yes. Brilliant. And Rishi, my last question is going to be: uh, you have done such beautiful work in your career and life, and you're also with your wife doing a lot of community work. Uh, how do you want to be remembered? What legacy you want to leave?
It's as you get older, you do start thinking about legacy. I am forever passionate about the ability to, um, you know, build a platform and build a legacy that is based on, did we do everything we could for the next generation? And that's both a personal platform, but also for our children. But then as I think about a law department, have I done everything to set this place up for success, the next generation, the next decades to come, and what does the future look like, and are we future ready? So are we moving fast enough to get to the future? And so for me, I would love it if somebody thought of my career and thought, he led with this ability to see what lies ahead, what's around the corner, and he built a department that was ready for that, solution around the corner. But then he also, was so committed to the communities in which we live and work, that he helped bring those along as well and made an impact there.
Hmm. Beautiful, beautiful. Rishi, we learned a lot from you today, and I really want to thank you for sharing such beautiful wisdom points
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
and love the conversation. Thank you for your time today. Really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
More than welcome, Amit. Thank you for the good questions. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Thanks.